Think you know the history of Rome? Everything you have been told is a pretty facade hiding a rotten foundation soaked in blood and betrayal. In this video, we are descending into the darkest depths of antiquity. You will learn why the Eternal City started as a filthy camp for runaway convicts and murderers. We will uncover the mystery of the first king's disappearance. Did he ascend to the gods, or was he torn to pieces by his own senators, who hid the body parts beneath their robes? I will tell you about the hero who saved his homeland, only to immediately stab his own sister without hesitation. You will hear the crunch of bones under the wheels of a chariot driven by a daughter who ran over her own father for a crown. We will talk about how religion was invented as a tool of psychological hypnosis, and how one woman's terrible tragedy forced the people to overthrow tyrants and create the Republic. Ready to see the true face of an empire that built a paradise for its own by creating a hell for outsiders? Then watch until the end. The truth will be shocking. Forget the white togas. Erase the memories of marble columns shimmering in the sun. Get the fairy tales about noble patricians having philosophical conversations in the shade of olive groves out of your head. It is all a lie. Later plaster used to shamefully cover up rotten, blood-soaked foundations. We start with the truth. And the truth does not smell like incense. It smells like wet dog, molding hay, and stomach-churning fear. You are not in the Eternal City right now. You are in a filthy, lice-ridden refugee camp that was named Rome by some misunderstanding. Imagine a ghetto. Imagine a slum where the dregs of the Italian peninsula converge. Murderers, runaway slaves, debtors with nothing to lose but their heads, and adventurers ready to slit a throat for a bowl of stew. These are your founding fathers. Could you survive here for even 24 hours? Surrounded by nothing but swamps, fever, and hills where hovels made of mud and sticks cling to the slopes. No grandeur, just the instinct of self-preservation, exposed like a raw nerve. At a time when the Tiber overflowed its banks once again, turning the streets into a foul-smelling mess, a shadow loomed over this rabble. And that shadow was long, heavy, and deadly. Look to the north. There, just a few miles upstream, rise the walls of Fidense. This is not a bandit camp. This is a real city. Rich, well-fed, arrogant. Fidense looks at Rome not as a neighbor. They look at it like a festering sore, like a cancerous tumor that appeared on their land and began devouring resources. Trade routes? Blocked. Access to salt? Forget it. Fidense decided not just to scare the upstarts, they decided to strangle them. Do you feel the noose tightening? This is an economic blockade in the 8th century BC. Rome is running out of grain. Livestock is starting to drop from lack of feed. Children stop crying because they simply have no strength left. This is a silent war. A war without the clash of swords, but with the crunch of empty stomachs. Romulus, this pack leader, paces in his hut, which sycophants call a palace. He understands. Time is working against him. Every day of peace kills more of his people than an open battle. But Fidense makes a mistake. The mistake of well-fed people who underestimate hungry beasts. They decide not to wait for famine to do all the work. They need a public execution. They need not just to destroy Rome, but to erase the very reminder that a bunch of vagrants dared to call themselves a people. The gates of Fidense open, and that is not the sound of hope. It is the sound of a death sentence. Imagine you are standing on the palisade of the Roman rampart. Your hands are shaking, gripping a poorly sharpened spear. You have no armor, just a piece of rough leather on your chest. And in the distance, in the haze of the morning mist, bronze begins to gleam. A real army is coming. Orderly rows, heavy shields, discipline honed by generations. There are many of them, frighteningly many. They are not coming to loot. You have nothing to loot but lice and debt. They are coming to cleanse the territory. This was not a conflict between two powers. This was a punitive operation, a sanitary cleanup. Fidenae saw the Romans not as warriors, but as vermin that needed to be smoked out of their hole and beaten to death with sticks. And they had every reason to think so. What can a rabble oppose against professionals? Rage? Rage is good in a tavern brawl, but it shatters against a wall of shields like a rotten apple against stone. The atmosphere in the Roman camp changes instantly. The whining stops. It is replaced by an icy numbness. Do you hear that sound? It is not thunder. It is the march of hundreds of feet shod in quality leather. The ground vibrates. The rat is cornered. There is nowhere to run. The river is behind. Death is ahead. Swamps are on the sides. Romulus looks at his people. He sees in their eyes not courage, but animal terror. The very terror that turns a man into cattle, obediently walking to the slaughter. If they stay behind the walls, they will be starved or burned. If they go out into the field, they will be trampled. Zugzwang. Any move leads to death. History could have ended right here. There would be no Caesar, no legions, no Colosseum. Just a burnt-out ruin overgrown with weeds, and a couple of lines in the chronicles of neighboring peoples. Bandits lived here, but we killed them. But at that moment, when the smell of urine and sweat mixed with the smell of an approaching storm, something strange happens. Instead of praying to the gods or preparing for a last stand, Romulus gives an order that makes his lieutenants' eyes pop out of their heads. It is not an order to form a phalanx. It is not an order to reinforce the gates. It is a suicide plan. Or the plan of a genius who has nothing left to lose. He looks at the approaching army of Fidenae, at this shining machine of death, and a mean, crooked grin appears on his face. He knows something they do not. He knows the psychology of a street fight. "Open the gates," he hisses. Not to surrender, and not to meet the enemy chest to chest. The army of Fidenae approaches. They see the commotion on the Roman ramparts. They see the Romans running around in panic, dropping weapons, grabbing bundles. For the Fidenae commander, this is a sweet sight. The enemy is broken before the first strike. Victory is already in his pocket. He just needs to reach out and take it. Greed clouds his eyes. The desire for slaughter makes the blood pound in his temples, drowning out the voice of reason. They do not see the trap. They see prey. Hundreds of years later, historians will write about this as a great tactic. But then, standing knee-deep in mud, no one thought about tactics. They thought about how to sell their lives dearly, or how to cheat death for one more day. The Romans come out of the gates, but not in orderly rows. They spill out like frightened ants from a disturbed anthill. They run. They turn away from the enemy. They show their backs. The most shameful gesture for a warrior of antiquity. The back is a target. The back is an invitation to kill. The Fidenae infantry howled with delight. The formation breaks. Why hold the line if the enemy is already running? Catch them! Chop them down! Whoever breaks into the camp first gets the best women and the little gold these ragamuffins have. This was the moment of truth. The moment when the hunter loses vigilance, intoxicated by the scent of blood. Fidenae rushed in pursuit, stretching out across the field, forgetting about flanks, forgetting about orders. They ran after easy prey, not noticing that they were running straight into the jaws of a beast that was only pretending to be dead. The trap was set. The spring was compressed to the limit. Tension hung in the air, thick as the blood that was about to be spilled. The earth shook under the feet of thousands of running men, raising clouds of dust that hid the truth. And in that dust, in that chaos where shouts of triumph and stomping mixed, no one noticed how the look of the fleeing men changed. How hands that supposedly dropped shields in panic actually tightened their grip on the hilts of swords hidden under cloaks. The distance was closing. 500 steps. 300. 100. Fidenae already saw the faces of the Romans twisted with fear. Or did it just seem like fear to them? That year, when drought turned the grass into yellow straw, ready to flare up from a single spark, Rome was preparing to teach the world the first lesson of its bloody evolution. A lesson that there is nothing more dangerous than an enemy who shows you his back. Remember this moment. 1 second before impact. The second when the predator turns into the prey without realizing it yet. The heart pounds in the throat. Dust clogs the nose. Now everything will change. Now history will make a sharp turn, leaving logic and mercy on the roadside. The mousetrap snaps shut. You will not confuse this sound with anything else. It is not the ringing of metal or a battle cry. It is the sound of the human psyche breaking. A moment ago, the men of Fidenae were hunters. They rushed forward, intoxicated by the thrill of the chase, already mentally dividing Roman women and Roman livestock. Their formations scattered, shields lowered, breathing ragged from running. They saw only the backs of fleeing vagrants. And then, at one sharp, guttural signal from Romulus, those backs turned into a wall of shields. The Romans turned around not like an army on parade. They turned around like a beast cornered that decided to sell its life at the highest exchange rate. Imagine the inertia of 1,000 running bodies. The men of Fidenae simply could not stop. The front ranks, realizing the trap, tried to break, to dig their sandals into the dusty ground. But the rear ranks, understanding nothing yet, kept pushing, shoving their comrades straight onto Roman swords. And then the jaws of the trap slammed shut. From the flanks, from ravines and dense bushes where a minute ago there was only silence, fresh detachments burst out. The very ones Romulus had hidden in advance. It was not a fair fight. It was a beating. The men of Fidenae had no chance to reform. In the crush, in the stampede, long spears became useless, and short Roman blades worked like sewing needles, stitching shrouds for yesterday's masters of life. Have you ever seen how panic spreads in a crowd? It is faster than fire in dry grass. Heroes who just dreamt of glory now dreamt of only one thing: to be as far away from this cursed place as possible. They turned and ran back, to the saving walls of their city, to their mothers, to their wives, to safety. But Romulus was not going to let them go. He knew, if you let the enemy leave, tomorrow he will return with new forces. A wounded beast must be finished off. And the Romans, these yesterday's shepherds and outcasts, tasted blood. They were not running after the enemy. They were running on the enemy's shoulders. It was a mad race against death. The men of Fidenae rushed to the gates, praying to all the gods that they would be open. And the guards on the walls looked down in horror. What should they do? Close the gates and doom their soldiers to death under the walls? Or leave them open and risk the whole city? A dilemma worthy of a Greek tragedy. But there was no time for reflection. The stream of bodies, a mixture of friends and foes, screaming in terror and growling in rage, burst into the city in a single avalanche. They simply did not have time to slam the gates shut. What happened next, historians usually call by the dry word capture. But we agreed to speak the truth. It was a massacre. War entered their homes. The narrow streets of Fidenae, created for trade and gossip, became deadly traps. The Romans took no prisoners. Why feed extra mouths when your own children have nothing to eat? Imagine the chaos of urban combat in the 8th century BC. No coordination, just chaotic skirmishes in doorways, on roofs, in temples. The smell of burning began to overpower the smell of blood. Rich houses, where goods had accumulated for centuries, were emptied in minutes. Gold, bronze, slaves, everything of value passed into the hands of those who that morning had nothing but debts. The city that considered itself invincible ceased to exist as a power in one day. The elite of Fidenae, the very people who planned the economic blockade of Rome, now lay in the mud, and their expensive togas no longer differed in color from the rags of their killers. In this bloody fog, a new truth was born. The Romans understood. Arrogance works better than prayers. Cruelty pays off 100-fold. And neighbors do not exist for friendship. They exist to be robbed. When the dust settled and the screams died down, replaced by the weeping of survivors, Romulus stood in the middle of the captured square. He did not look like a triumphator from paintings. He was covered in mud and foreign blood from head to toe, but a cold fire burned in his eyes. He understood that this was just the beginning. Fidenae was just a warm-up, a pen test. Victory filled the stomachs of the Romans, but it also painted a huge target on their backs. Look at the smoke rising over the ruins of Fidenae. This black pillar is visible for many miles. And it is seen not only by birds, it is seen from the walls of another city. A city compared to which Fidenae was just a village. Veii, the Etruscan giant, a metropolis of the ancient world. Veii did not look like Latin settlements. It was a civilization. Engineers, architects, priests possessing secret knowledge, and, most importantly, they had a professional army. Heavy infantry encased in bronze, disciplined, trained to kill without emotion, like a machine. The Etruscans looked at the Romans not as a threat, but as an annoying misunderstanding, a mistake of nature that needed to be corrected. While the Romans divided the loot and celebrated, considering themselves masters of the world, a storm was already gathering in the north. A real storm. Not a gang skirmish, but a war of annihilation. Veii does not forgive insolence, and they do not make the mistakes of Fidenae. They will not run in disorder. The Romans thought they had gone through a baptism of fire. Fools. They merely pulled a tiger by the whiskers, and now the tiger has woken up. The silence that hung over the Tiber after the fall of Fidenae was deceptive. It was the silence before the hammer blow. Veii entered the game. And the rules of this game were simple. Only one survives. Do you feel the ground shaking? That is not wagons with looted goods. That is the Etruscan legions marching. A bronze sea ready to wash Rome off the face of the earth. Romulus's luck seemed to have run out. There is no defense against a crowbar if you only have a wooden stick in your hands. Or is there? At the moment when the first rays of the sun reflected off the wall of Etruscan shields drawn up in battle order, every Roman understood. Childhood was over. The era of giants had begun. And in this era, small, angry Rome was destined for a place under the heel. Or maybe despair is the fuel that runs the engine of empire. What will you do when you see a wall of death in front of you that is impossible to break? Run? Or remember that a cornered rat is capable of tearing out even a wolf's throat? The sky over the field of the future battle was gray, indifferent. The gods, if they looked down, were not betting on Rome. The odds were 100 to 1, but in the casino of history, sometimes 0 comes up, changing everything. Watch closely. Now you will see steel break against human rage. The collision did not look like a clap of thunder. Thunder is a clean, natural phenomenon. Here, there was a sickening crunch. The sound of human bones breaking against bronze shields. Roman rage, which yesterday's victors of Fidennae were so proud of, crashed against the wall of Etruscan discipline. Veii did not just stand. They worked.
Rank after rank, thrust after thrust. The Romans rolled onto this palisade of spears and rolled back, leaving their dead on the ground. This was the mathematics of war, and the equation was not adding up in Rome's favor. Do you see those eyes? The eyes of people who realized their luck had run out, that the gods had turned away. The formation began to bend. One more minute, and it will not be a retreat, but a panic flight that will end only in the grave. At this moment, when the air already smelled of defeat, Romulus does what distinguishes a commander from a butcher. He sees what others do not: the landscape. Veii pinned the Romans to the river, but in their self-confidence, the Etruscans themselves ended up on the edge of the boggy bank. Romulus tears off his helmet so that everyone can see his face. He screams so loud that the veins on his neck swell like ropes. He does not call for glory. He calls for anger. He personally throws himself into the thick of the fight, where death harvests the richest crop.
It was an act of suicidal despair that flipped the board. The Romans, seeing their king in the front row, rushed forward, not for victory, but to die not like cattle. This mad, bestial pressure forced the Etruscan phalanx to take a step back, then another. The ground under their feet became treacherously soft. And then Rome's most terrifying ally entered the battle: the Tiber. Have you ever tried swimming in full combat gear? An Etruscan hoplite carried pounds of bronze on himself: greaves, breastplate, heavy helmet, huge shield. On solid ground, this made him a tank. In the viscous coastal sludge, it turned him into an anchor. The battle turned into a slaughter in the mud. The formation crumbled. The Etruscans, these proud professionals, slipped, fell, and could no longer get up. The Romans, dressed in light skins and rags, jumped on them, trampling enemies into the silt.
The water in the Tiber turned brown. The current picked up those who tried to escape by swimming and carried them to the bottom.
Do you hear those gurgling sounds? That is not fish playing. That is the elite of Veii, the flower of the nation, choking on their own blood and river dregs. That day, the river was satiated with the dead too generously. Victory was torn out with teeth, nails, pure primal will to live. Veii retreated, leaving mountains of expensive metal on the shore, inside which rotted the bodies of their soldiers. Rome survived. But what does victory do to a man who is used only to struggle? Romulus returned to the city not just as a hero. He returned as a living god. He defeated neighbors. He defeated giants. He seemed to have defeated death itself. And here begins the darkest chapter of this story. Power is a drug you get hooked on from the first hit. And absolute power corrupts absolutely and instantly. Yesterday's pack leader, who shared the last piece of bread with soldiers, began to change. He stopped listening. The Council of Elders, the Senate, turned into an annoying nuisance for him. Why listen to a bunch of decrepit old men when you speak to the gods as equals? Romulus surrounded himself with bodyguards, the Celeres. 300 young thugs ready to carry out any order without asking questions. He started wearing purple. He started acting like a tyrant. Do you feel the atmosphere in the city changing? Instead of the joy of victory, sticky fear. The senators, those very fathers by whose hands the state was built, suddenly realized they created a monster. And this monster now looks at them as dead weight. Whispers in dark corners became louder than prayers. The father of the nation became a threat to the nation itself, or at least to its elite. And the elite, as is known, does not like being pushed away from the trough. And so, that very day arrives.
The Nones of July. An assembly at the Goat Swamp, or, as it was called, the Volcanal. Romulus is reviewing the troops. He stands on a raised platform, alone, unreachable in his greatness. Around him are senators. They press in a tight ring around the throne. Suddenly the sky turns black. This is not just rain. This is a biblical storm. Thunder so strong it hurts your ears. Lightning tears the sky apart, blinding the crowd. People scatter in panic, seeking shelter from the wrath of the heavens. Chaos, darkness, the howling wind. And when the storm subsides and the sun timidly peeks through the clouds, the throne is empty. Romulus is gone, vanished, dissolved into thin air. The people are confused. Soldiers are looking for their commander. But the senators, look at their faces. There is no surprise on them. On them is a strange, ominous calm. They hide their hands under their togas. They hide them too diligently. What happened under the cover of that storm?
The legend they will tell you in school says, the gods came down and took Romulus alive to heaven, for he was too great for this sinful earth. A beautiful fairy tale. Convenient. But facts scream otherwise. Historians who are not afraid to dirty their hands with the truth whisper another version. A version that makes blood run cold. Imagine this scene. A ring of old men tightening around the king. In their hands are not scrolls with laws, but daggers. Thunder drowns out cries for help. Lightning hides blood splatters. It was not an ascension. It was an execution. A cruel, swift, collective massacre. Where did the body go? Why was it not found? Evil tongues claimed that the senators did not just kill their king. They dismembered him. Everyone carried out a piece of the body under the folds of their wide toga. The founding father of Rome left this world in pieces, carried out by his own comrades like cuts of meat from a slaughterhouse. Rome was left headless.
The throne is empty. Panic begins on the streets. People who believed in the divinity of Romulus are ready to tear the Senate apart. They demand the truth. They demand their king. The army grumbles, gripping sword hilts. The city, which just survived a war with external enemies, stands on the threshold of civil war, the most terrible and senseless kind. The senators realize they made a mistake. They removed a tyrant, but created a martyr. The mob does not want freedom. The mob wants an idol. And if they are not given this idol immediately, they will burn Rome to the ground. The air in the forum is heated to the limit. One wrong word, one sideways glance, and the massacre will begin. The patricians lock themselves in their houses, realizing that their clever plan has cracked. They need a miracle. They need a lie of such magnitude that everyone will believe in it, from the lowest slave to the legion veteran. A lie that will become the foundation of the empire. And at this critical moment, when the fate of Rome hung by a thread, a man enters the scene whose name you have likely never heard. But it was he who saved the city from self-destruction. Not with a sword, but with a word. Proculus Julius. Remember that name.
He comes out to the enraged crowd not as a politician, but as a witness to a miracle. Silence hangs over the square. Hundreds of eyes drill into him. He raises his hand, calling for attention. Now he will speak words that will turn a political assassination into a sacred sacrament. A lie for salvation is about to become a state religion. Proculus Julius stands on the platform. He feels the weight of 1,000 stares full of hatred and suspicion. The crowd below is no longer the people of Rome. It is a beast, ready to tear apart anyone guilty of their beloved leader's disappearance. The senators behind his back barely breathe.
They understand. If Proculus makes a mistake now, if his voice trembles, they will all be slaughtered right here on the steps, and no guards will help. This is the moment when history balances on a knife's edge. And Proculus begins to speak. But he does not make excuses. He does not seek an alibi. He lies. He lies inspiredly, brazenly, with that sacred trembling that forces belief in the impossible. "Romans!" his voice carries over the forum, cutting through the tense silence. "Today, at dawn, as I walked along the road, he descended from the heavens, Romulus, but not the man we knew. He was clad in shining armor that blinded the eyes. I fell to my knees, seized with terror, and asked, 'Why did you leave us, Father?' The crowd freezes, hands gripping stones and sticks lower. People crave a miracle, not the truth. They are afraid to live in a world where a king can be slaughtered like a pig. They need a world where kings leave to the gods." And he answered me, Proculus continues, looking over their heads as if he still sees that ghost. "Tell the Romans, such is the will of the Celestials. My Rome will be the capital of the world. Let them practice the art of war, and no power on earth will be able to withstand them. I will watch over you from now on, as the god Quirinus." Brilliant. Just think about the beauty of this scheme. With one fictional dialogue, Proculus Julius solves all problems. The senators get an alibi. They are not murderers, they are witnesses to divine providence. The people get consolation. Their king is not dead, he has been promoted. And the state gets a new, heavenly patron. The murder is erased. A cult is born. The crowd exhales. Anger is replaced by religious ecstasy. Those who a minute ago wanted the blood of patricians now fall prostrate and pray to the new god Quirinus. A lie that is profitable for everyone to believe becomes stronger than any stone. This was the first lesson of Roman propaganda. If reality does not suit you, invent a new one and make it sacred. But the euphoria passes. A god in heaven is wonderful, but who will keep order on earth? The throne is empty. And here Rome makes an attempt that could have been funny if it were not so tragic. The Senate decides, we do not need a new tyrant. We will rule ourselves. The year begins that historians will call by the strange word interregnum, between reigns. Imagine a state machine that, instead of one driver, has 100 people, and each takes the wheel in turn. The senators divided into groups, each ruling for a few days. It was a catastrophe. Power, smeared in a thin layer, ceased to be power. Laws contradicted each other. Decisions were made and cancelled within 24 hours. The people, that same rabble used to the firm hand of Romulus, began to grumble. "We had one master, and now there are 100 of them," they shouted in the streets. "This is not freedom. This is a multi-headed hydra devouring itself."
Rome was again on the verge of revolt. The experiment with democracy failed before it even started. It became clear: the pack needs a leader, an alpha. But where to get him? Choose one of the Roman patricians? Impossible. The Sabines living in the city will rebel. Choose a Sabine? The Romans will not tolerate it. Dead end. And they come out of this dead end in the most unexpected way. They find a man who is the least suitable for the role of bandit king. Forget about warriors. Forget about heroes with scars on their faces. The Senate's gaze falls on a man who lives in the forest, wears simple clothes, and is rumored to talk to trees. Numa Pompilius, a Sabine, a philosopher, a hermit. When the envoys came to him with the offer of the crown, he laughed in their faces. Me, king of a city that lives by war? Me, who honors silence and the gods? You have lost your minds. He refused. He did not want power, and perhaps that is why he was the ideal candidate. In Rome, where everyone was ready to tear throats for the position of lictor, a man running from power looked like an alien. They persuaded him, or forced him. History is silent about the details of the deal, but Numa entered Rome, and the city froze in bewilderment. The new king carried no weapons. He had no thug bodyguards. He looked like a victim who came to the slaughter himself. Romulus's veterans looked at him with contempt. How will this bookworm keep us in check? They were wrong. Numa was much more dangerous than Romulus. Romulus broke bones. Numa broke minds. He understood Rome's main problem. This collection of murderers and thieves cannot be kept in fear of the sword forever. Sooner or later, the sword will become dull, or a longer sword will be found. To turn a gang into a nation, you need to force them to fear something that cannot be killed. You need to force them to fear the invisible. The greatest psychological operation in the history of antiquity began. Numa did not issue decrees. He broadcast the will of the heavens. Do you think he just made up laws? Oh no, that would be too boring. He put on plays. Every night he went into the sacred grove. He returned in the morning with burning eyes and whispered that he met his lover there, the nymph Egeria. She told me, he would begin, and the most hardened cutthroats who had gone through fire and water opened their mouths. Who would dare argue with a man who sleeps with a goddess? Numa rewired Rome. He created priestly colleges, pontiffs, augurs, salii. He entangled the life of the citizens in a web of rituals. Before, to start a war, you just had to grab a spear. Now you had to watch the flight of birds, divine by the liver of a sacrificial bull, wait for favorable days. He introduced a calendar. He divided days into phas and nephas, permissible and impermissible. He stole their chaotic time from the Romans and returned it ordered, subordinate to a divine rhythm. You cannot just go and kill a neighbor, because today, you see, Jupiter is against it. The Romans, these wild beasts, suddenly found they were living in a cage. But the bars of this cage were made not of iron, but of superstition. Fear of the gods' wrath turned out to be stronger than the thirst for profit. Numa taught them to fear lightning more than an enemy arrow. He built the temple of Janus, the god of beginnings and endings, and for the first time in Roman history, he closed its gates. This was a shock. Closed gates meant peace. Absolute, total peace. For a city born in blood and living by robbery, this was unnatural. But Numa was persuasive. His nymph whispered the right words to him. Discipline of the spirit replaced discipline of the barracks. He gave Rome a soul. Artificial, synthesized in the laboratory of his brilliant mind, but working. He tied every citizen to the state, not by fear of execution, but by fear of a curse. This was the highest form of manipulation. The father of the nation ceased to be a pack leader and became a high priest. 43 years. Think about that number. 43 years of absolute silence. Not a single major war, not a single rebellion. Neighbors who recently dreamed of wiping Rome off the face of the earth now came here not with swords, but with gifts, to look at this miracle. A city of the righteous. Rome grew rich. Fields were cultivated, trade flourished. A whole generation of people grew up who had never seen guts spilled on a battlefield. They knew about war only from the drunken stories of their grandfathers. Swords hanging on walls began to be covered with a thin layer of red rust. But do you know what is most terrible about a long peace? It accumulates boredom. Human nature does not change from prayers. The beast inside did not die. It just fell asleep, lulled by the sweet smoke of incense. It slept and dreamed of blood. Energy that used to spill out in raids now fermented inside, like young wine in a tightly sealed barrel. Pressure grew. Numa was aging. His magic rested on his personal authority, on the mystical aura he had so skillfully created around himself. But people do not live forever, even those who sleep with nymphs. And in the eyes of the youth examining the rusty weapons of their fathers, an unhealthy gleam began to appear. The questions they asked were becoming more dangerous. If we're the chosen of the gods, why do we plow the earth like simple peasants? Our grandfathers took cities, and what will we take? What is scarier, the enemy at the gates, or this endless, sticky, soul-corroding boredom? Numa's golden age was beautiful, like a sunset. But night always comes after sunset. And in this darkness, that very ancient demon, which Numa so diligently drove underground with prayers and fasting, was already preparing to wake up. Peace is just a pause between wars, and this pause dragged on for too long. The spring was compressed to the limit. Someone had to come and pull the trigger. Someone who does not believe in nymphs. Someone who remembers how it all started. Rust on swords is not a sign of well-being. It is a harbinger of catastrophe. Because when these swords are taken out of their scabbards again, they will demand blood with redoubled force to wash away the shame of decades of peace. Numa was dying, taking the secret of his hypnosis with him, and at his deathbed, the shadow of the next king already stood. And in the hands of this shadow were no scrolls with prayers. There was only naked metal, thirsty for work. The era of saints was ending. The era of killers was returning. When Numa Pompilius's last breath dissolved in the incense-scented air of his bedroom, Rome froze. But this was not the mournful silence of orphans who lost a father. It was the silence of a predator finally unmuzzled. The pendulum of history, having swung toward piety, froze at a dead point. And now the gravity of human nature inexorably pulled it back, down, into the abyss of violence. Tullus Hostilius takes the throne. Look at him. He is the complete opposite of the late saint. If Numa looked at the stars, Tullus looks at a map. If Numa sought wisdom in the whisper of nymphs, Tullus seeks it in the ringing of steel. He is the grandson of that very Hostius Hostilius who died defending the citadel against the Sabines. War is in his blood. The new king hates the silence. He is annoyed by this sleepy, well-fed city, fat on peaceful bread. He walks the streets and sees not prosperity, but degradation. "We have become merchants," he growls at his advisors. "We have become shepherds who are afraid to slaughter their own sheep without an augur's permission." For him, 43 years of peace is not a golden age. It is 43 years of shame. It is a coma into which a nation of warriors has fallen. And Tullus decides to break this coma. Harshly, without anesthesia. He needs a war. And not just a petty border skirmish with savages. He needs a conflict that will shake Rome to its very foundation, knock the foolishness about holiness out of heads, and return the taste of real life to people. The taste of blood on their lips. But whom to fight? All neighbors are pacified. Treaties are signed, oaths made to the gods. Tullus Hostilius looks at Alba Longa. This is madness. Alba Longa is not just a neighbor. It is the ancestral home, the mother city. It was from there that Romulus's ancestors came. It is the same as declaring war on your own parents. Sacrilege? For Numa, yes. For Tullus, an excellent opportunity. Politics is the art of finding a pretext where there is none. A classic provocation begins. Roman agents, dressed as bandits, begin to rob Alban lands. The Albans, in turn, respond in kind. Mutual insults, theft of livestock, drunken fights at the border. Trifles from which a fire is fanned. Alba Longa sends envoys to demand compensation for damages. According to Numa's laws, they must be received, heard, and judged fairly. What does Tullus do? He throws a feast for them. He feeds them the best wine, entertains them with dancers, stalls for time. And at this very moment, his own envoys are already standing before the king of Alba and presenting an ultimatum that is impossible to accept. This is the diplomacy of a thug. Tullus deliberately drives the situation into a dead end. He does not need peace. He needs a refusal. And when he gets it, he plays a scene of righteous anger before the people. "They rejected our friendship!" he screams from the forum. "They violated the laws of hospitality. The gods are witnesses. We did not start this war, but we will finish it." A lie? Absolutely. But the crowd roars with delight. And then comes the climax of this political spectacle, the moment that crosses out half a century of history. Tullus Hostilius goes to the temple of Janus. Remember those heavy bronze gates that Numa closed as a sign of eternal peace? They were overgrown with cobwebs. The hinges were covered with a thick layer of rust. Ivy wrapped around the doors, as if trying to seal them forever. Tullus does not call the priests. He does not read prayers. He walks up to the doors and pushes them with force. A grinding sound is heard, a piercing, screeching sound of metal stripping rust. This sound cuts the ears like the scream of a wounded animal. The gates, resisting, shudder and swing wide open. The dark maw of the temple is open again. The god of war, Janus, looks with his two faces at the city, and a mockery can be read in his stone eyes. "I knew you would come back." Rome drops the mask. The holy city disappeared. There remained a camp of killers, armed to the teeth, who were simply given a break. Look at the faces of young Romans. Do you see fear there? No. There is relief. Finally, everything became clear. Finally, the time of complex rituals and incomprehensible prohibitions is over. The world is simple. You have a sword. The enemy has what you want. Go and take it. The legions form up on the Campus Martius. Old men shake their heads, predicting trouble, but no one listens to them. Their time went with Numa. Now is the time of the young, angry, and hungry. The air hums with tension. Dust rises from thousands of feet, and the last remnants of morality dissolve in this dust. Tullus Hostilius achieved his goal. He woke the beast. And this beast turned out to be much scarier than it was under Romulus. Because now it is not just a gang fighting for survival. It is an organized, ideologically pumped machine that believes in its right to kill. The war with Alba Longa will not be just a conflict. It will become a ritual killing of the past. Rome must destroy its mother to prove that it has grown up, to become the sole master of Latium. Cruelty becomes a national idea. Mercy is declared weakness. You asked how empires are born? They are not born in libraries or temples. They are born at the moment when a people decides that their greatness is more important than another's life. When the concept of justice is replaced by the concept of expediency. The cycle has closed. Rome's evolution has made a full turn, from a gang of outcasts to a religious community and back, to a ruthless empire ready to devour everything in its path. Masks are thrown off. Illusions are dispelled. They prayed to the gods for peace, but deep down they always craved war. Because peace is boring. Peace does not bring gold. Peace does not provide slaves. Peace does not write names in eternity. But war? War is the only way to feel alive in this cruel, indifferent world. Tullus Hostilius stands by the open gates of Janus. He is smiling. Ahead are rivers of blood, betrayal, and great victories. Ahead are centuries of triumphs that will be paid for with millions of lives. But that will be later. And now there is only this grinding of rusty hinges, sounding like music to his ears. And looking at this marching formation, at this shine of polished bronze, ask yourself one simple question. A question that will haunt humanity for thousands of years after the fall of Rome. What is scarier? A beast that kills to survive, or a civilization that has turned murder into the meaning of its existence? The gates of Janus are thrown open. The rusty hinges are torn off. But the war Tullus Hostilius dreamed of did not start with a battle, but with the strangest and most tense standoff in the history of early Rome. Imagine this field, 5 miles from the city, a place later called the Tullian Trench. 2 armies stand opposite each other, Romans against Albans. But this is not an ordinary war. It is a mirror. Look into the faces of the soldiers. They look alike. They wear the same armor. They pray to the same gods. Moreover, they speak the same language, literally. In the ranks of the Romans stand men whose mothers were born in Alba Longa. In the ranks of the Albans are cousins of Roman centurions. This is not an invasion of barbarians. This is civil war in its ugliest, embryonic form. The air trembles not from heat, but from monstrous awkwardness. To kill an Etruscan is valor. To kill a Sabine is a necessity. But to plunge a sword into the stomach of a man with whom you drank wine at the festival of the Latin Ferii? The hands of experienced killers sweat on the hilts of gladii. No one gives the order to attack. The silence is such that you can hear flies buzzing over future corpses. Tullus Hostilius is furious. He brought the beast here to eat meat, and the beast tucked its tail. His blitzkrieg plan is crumbling against sentimentality. But then cold political calculation comes into play. Mettius Fufetius enters the scene, dictator of Alba Longa, a slippery, smart, and cowardly man. He knows his army does not want to fight, but he knows something else. He points Tullus to the hills. "Look," he says, "we are gnawing at each other here like two dogs over a bone, and up there sit wolves waiting for us to weaken." The Etruscans, Veii and Fidenae, they are not sleeping. Their scouts are already on the crests of the hills. They are watching this show with popcorn, waiting for the moment to come down and finish off the winner.
If Rome and Alba clash seriously now, by sunset, both armies will cease to exist. And tomorrow, Latium will be ruled by people speaking a foreign language. This was the moment of truth. The moment when realpolitik won over bloodlust. Tullus Hostilius and Mettius Fufetius, two predators, made a deal. Not for peace, for the preservation of assets. Why spend thousands of lives if the question of primacy can be solved cheaper? The cynicism of this decision is fascinating. They decided to turn the war into a tote board, into a sporting event with a lethal outcome. "Let the fate of two cities be decided by the chosen ones," suggested Fufetius. Tullus agreed. It was resource economy, genius death management. Instead of fertilizing the field with thousands of bodies, we will sacrifice a handful of heroes. The rest will simply be spectators in the front row of the stalls. But whom to choose? Whom to send to the slaughter for the ambitions of kings? In both armies, triplets were found. Twin brothers, a genetic anomaly that became a symbol of fate.
In the Roman camp, the Horatii; in the Alban, the Curiatii. Young, strong, beautiful guys. The golden youth of that time. They knew each other. There is a version that they were even distant relatives. They are called out of formation. 6 people, 6 pawns on the empire's board. Think about the horror of the situation. They were not just ordered to fight. They were ordered to kill people they might have called friends, so that one city could enslave another. This is not a duel of honor. This is a human sacrifice. Tullus Hostilius walks up to the Horatii. He does not speak to them of patriotism. He tells them, "If you lose, Rome will become a slave. You are the shield behind which your mothers hide." The pressure is colossal. The entire weight of the state falls on the shoulders of 3 youths. The atmosphere changes. Gloom is replaced by excitement. Armies that just feared fratricide now crave a spectacle. They sit on the slopes of the ditch, like in an amphitheater. Bets are made. Who will win? Rome or Alba? Technique or strength? Rage or calculation? No one thinks about what the mothers of these guys feel. History is generally not a woman's business, is it? History is written by those who send sons to die, not by those who give birth to them. The trumpet signal, sharp as the crack of a whip. 6 fighters converge in the center of the empty field. The clang of the first blow. Sparks. And immediately, a scream of pain. This is not a sword dance shown in movies. This is a dirty, fast, ugly butchery. Blows are delivered not beautifully, but vilely. In the neck, in the groin, under the knee. Rome freezes. 2 Horatii fall, one after another. Dead. Their blood soaks into the dry earth, the very earth for which they fought. The Roman stand gasps. Is it all over? 3 Curiatii against 1 surviving Roman. Mathematics is against Horatius. 3 against 1. The Albans are already shouting with joy. Mettius Fufetius looks triumphantly at Tullus. But Tullus does not look away. He sees what others do not see. The Curiatii are wounded. They are bleeding. They are slow. And the last Horatius, he is intact. And he is not going to die stupidly. He does what Romulus did in the battle with Fidenae. He turns and runs. The stands howl with indignation. "Coward! Traitor! Disgrace of Rome!" The crowd is ready to tear him apart themselves, not waiting for the Albans. How can one run when the fate of the homeland is at stake? But this is not flight. This is tactics. This is divide and conquer in miniature. Horatius knows. If he accepts battle with all three at once, they will surround and stab him. But if he runs... The wounded curiatii rush in pursuit, but they run at different speeds. The one who is lightly wounded breaks ahead. The one bleeding lags behind. The severely wounded one drags at the tail. The enemy formation stretches out. A single fist turns into 3 separate fingers. Horatius runs 100 yards, stops abruptly, turns around. The first Alban, out of breath, flies at him. A strike, fast, precise, deadly. 1 down. The stands fall silent. They begin to understand. Horatius runs to the second. He is no longer the hunter. He is the victim. He is exhausted. The wound prevents him from lifting his shield. Horatius knocks him off his feet and finishes him with a blow to the throat. The third remains, the weakest, the most wounded. He can barely stand on his feet. He realizes it is all over. He looks at the approaching Horatius not as an enemy, but as an executioner. It was not a victory in a duel. It was an execution. Horatius drives the sword into the throat of the last opponent with such force that it seems he wants to pierce the earth beneath him too. 2 I sacrificed to the shades of my brothers. The third I sacrificed to Rome, that it may rule over Alba. The roar of the Roman army drowns out everything. Tullus Hostilius triumphs. His bet played out. Alba Longa, the ancient city, cradle of the Latins, just lost its independence. Without a big war, without a siege, simply because one guy turned out to be cunninger than 3. But do not rush to rejoice. The blood on Horatius's hands has not yet dried, and fate is already preparing a new, even more terrible exam for him. The winner returns to the city. He carries the armor of the killed cousins as trophies. At the gates, his sister meets him, Camilla. She was the fiancée of one of the killed curiatii. She sees the bloody cloak of her fiancé in the hands of her brother Triumphator, and she does not shout, "Glory to Rome!" She starts sobbing and cursing her brother murderer. She tears her hair, screaming the name of her beloved. At that moment, something clicks in the hero's head. The adrenaline of battle, the smell of blood, the madness of the fight, all this is still boiling in him. He just saved the homeland. He is a god. And this girl dares to mourn the enemy? Mourn the one who wanted to enslave Rome? "Go to your fiancé with such love," he yells. A swing of the sword. The sister falls dead at the feet of her brother Triumphator. The silence that hung at the Capena gate was scarier than the silence on the battlefield. The Romans were stunned. The hero of the nation, just in front of everyone, killed an unarmed girl. His sister. It was a shock. It was the collapse of all moral foundations. Horatius's father, an old man who just lost 2 sons and a daughter, stands over the body. What will he say? Curse the killer? Demand a trial? No. The old man looks at the crowd with dry, mad eyes and utters a phrase that should send a chill down your spine. She deserved it. If he hadn't killed her, I would have done it myself. Rome acquitted the killer because Rome understood the main truth of its existence. The state is more important than the family. Patriotism is more important than love. If you are not with us, you are against us, even if you are our daughter. Thus, on the blood of brothers and a sister, The bill of sale for the soul of the Roman people was signed. Alba Longa fell, but Rome lost its innocence completely. Now it was a city with a sword settled any disputes, even family ones. But Mettius Fufetius, kneeling before Tullus, did not forget the humiliation. The snake did not die, it just lay low. The betrayal he is preparing will cost Rome much more than the blood of one family. The deal made on the blood of the Horatii and Curiatii turned out to be rotten. Mettius Fufetius, dictator of Alba, bent the knee, but did not bow his head. Have you ever seen how a man smiles while holding a knife behind his back? That is exactly how Mettius looked at Tullus Hostilius during the triumphal processions.
He kept his life, but lost his honor. And for a politician of antiquity, this is worse than death. He became a vassal, a pawn in the Roman king's deck. And he decided to flip the table. The opportunity presented itself soon. Fidenae, the eternal thorn in Rome's side, raised its head again. They understood, as long as Rome and Alba are united, they cannot be defeated. But if a wedge is driven between them... Mettius Fufetius sends secret messengers to Fidenae. His message is simple and cynical. Start a war. I will lead my troops onto the field, but at the decisive moment, I will stab Rome in the back. Or simply step aside and watch you get slaughtered. It was the plan not of a warrior, but of a vulture. And so the armies stand in the dust again. Romans and Albans on one flank, enemies on the other. The battle begins. The clash of shields, the crack of spears, the familiar music of war. Tullus Hostilius fights in the front row, confident that his right flank is covered by allies. But suddenly something strange happens. The Alban banners begin to shift. They do not attack the enemy. They slowly, as if reluctantly, retreat to the hills. The Roman formation is exposed. The flank is open. This is a catastrophe. In a few minutes, enemy cavalry will pour into this breach, and only a wet spot will remain of the Roman legion. A Roman centurion runs up to the king, pale as a sheet. "Mettius has betrayed us. The Albans are leaving." At this moment, Tullus Hostilius performs an act that proves Rome's evolution is complete. From a gang leader, he turned into a grand master of lies. He does not panic. He does not curse the traitor. He understands. If the soldiers realize they have been betrayed, panic will begin. And panic is death. Tullus raises a bloody sword and yells so that he is heard not only by his own, but also by the enemies. "Stay calm. This is my order." The Albans are flanking the enemy to hit them in the rear. We are catching them in pincers. It was a lie of grand scale. Improvisation on the edge of the grave. But it worked. The Roman soldiers, hearing the king's voice, took heart. "It's a maneuver! We have surrounded them!" Fear was replaced by rage. But the enemies, the men of Fidenae, heard Tullus's shout. They saw the Albans taking the high ground, and they believed it. They decided they had been lured into a trap. Psychology turned the tide of the battle. The enemy faltered, frightened by a non-existent encirclement, and ran. Mettius Fufetius, watching from the hill, never dared to enter the fight. He remained a spectator of his own failure. The vulture remained hungry. When the battle ended, the field was strewn with corpses, but Rome stood. Mettius came down from the hills, pulling on the mask of a loyal ally. He congratulated Tullus, fawned, explained his maneuvers by some complex tactical necessity. Tullus listened and smiled. His eyes were cold as the Tiber ice in winter. "You did an excellent job, Mettius," he said. "Come tomorrow at dawn. We will hold a purifying sacrifice."
At dawn, the Roman army formed a square. The Albans, suspecting nothing, came without weapons, in only tunics, expecting a celebration. But instead of priests, they were met by a ring of Roman spears. Tullus walked to the center. He was no longer smiling. He spoke quietly, but every word fell like a stone on a coffin lid. He told everything. About the betrayal, about the secret conspiracies, about how Mettius stood on the hill and waited for Rome's demise.
Mettius Fufetius,
Thundered the king's voice.
your soul was torn between loyalty and betrayal.
You could not choose a side. Well, I will help you. Let your body repeat the fate of your soul. At the king's signal, 2 chariots drive in, teams of 4 horses stomping their hooves. Mettius is seized.
His hands are tied to one chariot, his legs to the other. The crowd freezes. Even seasoned veterans look away. The drivers are given the command. Whips crack in the morning air. The horses tear in different directions. We will not describe what happened next. Let's just say the traitor's scream was short, but the memory of it lived for centuries. The land of Latium received the most generous and terrible sacrifice. Tullus Hostilius showed the whole world Rome has no pity for those who break oaths. Betrayal is not washed away by apologies. It is washed away only by blood. But the execution of one man is not enough. Tullus decides to root out the very cause of the betrayal. While Mettius was being torn apart, Roman detachments were already entering the gates of Alba Longa. There was no order to kill people. There was a scarier order: to kill the city. Imagine that day. Residents are given an hour to pack. You can take only what you can carry in your hands.
Alba Longa, a city that stood for 400 years, the city where Romulus's ancestors were born, was condemned. The Romans did not loot. They methodically, with cold efficiency, destroyed. Temples, except for old shrines, palaces, walls, houses of common people, everything was leveled to the ground. Dust rose to the heavens. The sound of crumbling walls drowned out the weeping of women. It was forced urbanization. A huge crowd of refugees, a whole people, trudged along the road to Rome, not as captives, but as new citizens. Tullus Hostilius doubled the population of his city in one day. He destroyed the mother to feed the child. Rome swallowed Alba. The Senate expanded, accepting noble Alban families. The Julii, Servilii, Quinctii, the very families that would later create the empire, came to Rome on this road of tears, carrying bundles of belongings on their shoulders while the ruins of their homeland burned behind their backs. The city grew. It swelled with the influx of new blood like a tick. The Celian hill was settled by new inhabitants. Rome's power became absolute. No one in Latium dared to challenge it anymore. But everything has a price. Tullus Hostilius, this demon of war, forgot one important lesson of Numa. Gods do not like being ignored. He was so busy with earthly victories that he stopped looking at the sky. He believed that luck was his personal slave. And then, at the peak of his power, when no enemies remained, something that cannot be pierced by a sword fell upon Rome. The plague. An invisible killer came to the city. People dropped right on the streets. Strong warriors who broke walls yesterday were burning with fever today, coughing up blood. The city, overcrowded with refugees, became an ideal incubator for death. Tullus also fell ill, and this iron man who despised religion suddenly broke. Fear of death turned the tyrant into a superstitious old man. He began feverishly seeking salvation.
He remembered Numa.
He ordered old scrolls to be brought, hoping to find a recipe for immortality, or at least forgiveness there. He found a description of a secret ritual dedicated to Jupiter Elysius, a ritual capable of summoning the god and getting answers. With trembling hands, in the delirium of fever, Tullus tried to perform the rite. But you can't bargain with gods like neighbors. You can't speak to them in the language of ultimatums. Tullus made a mistake somewhere. Maybe he mixed up the words, or maybe Jupiter was simply tired of this arrogant killer. That night, a storm broke out over the Palatine Hill like the old-timers had never seen. Lightning struck the king's house directly. It was not a random discharge. It was a precision strike of celestial artillery. The palace flared up like a torch. Tullus Hostilius, conqueror of Alba, trickster and warrior, burned alive together with his house and his ambitions. Not even ash remained of him to be buried. The fire cleared the place for the next act. Rome was again left without a king, but with a huge army, shattered morality, and a question that hung in the smoky air. Can an eternal city be built on a foundation of betrayal and fratricide? Or are we simply building a huge, magnificent tomb for ourselves? The ashes of Tullus Hostilius had not yet cooled on the Palatine. The smell of burnt flesh mixed with the smell of ozone after the lightning strike, and this cocktail evoked not grief in the Romans, but animal terror. The gods had spoken clearly. A warrior who forgets about the heavens burns. Rome was at a crossroads again. The pendulum of history, having swung from Numa's holiness to Tullus's madness, had to find a point of balance. The city needed a king who knew how to hold a sword, but did not spit in Jupiter's face. They needed a hybrid. And they found him. Ancus Marcius, the grandson of that very Numa Pompilius. Look at this man.
He does not look like his fanatic grandfather whispering with nymphs. But he does not look like the maniac Tullus either.
Ancus Marcius is the first Roman pragmatist, a bureaucrat of death. A man who understood one brilliant thing. To kill neighbors and loot their cities, you do not have to be a beast. It is enough to be a lawyer. Rome's neighbors, the Latins, made the same mistake as many before them. Hearing that a descendant of Numa was on the throne again, they rubbed their hands. Rome will become a monastery again, they decided. They will pray while we steal their cattle. The Latins started raids, confident in their impunity. They expected envoys with peaceful sermons. Instead, they saw the birth of the most cynical and effective military machine of antiquity. Ancus Marcius did not rush into the attack headlong. He did something scarier. He created the institution of the Fetials, priest diplomats. Imagine this scene: the border of Latin domains.
A Roman priest approaches it. On his head is a wool headband. In his hands, not a sword, but a staff. He does not shout curses. He reads a legal document in a loud, trained voice. A claim. If you do not return what was stolen within 33 days, the gods will be witnesses to your wrong. It was theater. Brilliant political theater. The Romans gave the enemy time, knowing that the proud Latins would refuse. And when the deadline expired, the priest returned to the border. In his hand was a spear with a charred, bloody tip. He threw it onto enemy land with the words, "I declare war on you, just and pious." Do you feel the difference? Tullus Hostilius fought because he wanted blood. Ancus Marcius fought because the law decided so. He made the gods accomplices in Roman aggression. Now every Roman legionnaire knew he is not a murderer. He is a bailiff executing a sentence of the heavens. This removed any moral limitations.
Killing with a clear conscience. What could be more terrible? The Latins were crushed. Their cities, Politorium, Telenae, Ficana, were wiped off the face of the earth, not in a fit of rage, but methodically, according to plan. Their inhabitants were forcibly resettled in Rome, on the Aventine Hill. The city swelled again, swallowing the defeated. Rome was turning into a melting pot, where yesterday's enemies became today's citizens, to go kill new enemies tomorrow. But just winning was not enough for Ancus Marcius. He understood. War is expensive. Looting gives a one-time profit, but real money comes from control. Look at the Tiber. This river was the vein through which life flowed, but it was also a barrier. Ancus Marcius builds the first bridge, the Sublician Bridge, Pile Bridge. Without a single nail, only wood and ropes, so that in case of an attack, it could be dismantled in an hour. This is not just a crossing. This is traffic control. Want to pass? Pay. Then he looks west, where the Tiber flows into the sea. Salt lagoons glisten there. Salt in the ancient world is worth more than gold. Salt is a preservative. It is life. It is money. Ancus Marcius founds Ostia, the first colony, the first seaport. Rome stops being a shepherd's camp. It becomes a trading corporation. Now the Romans control salt, crossings, and the law. They hold Latium by the throat not only with a sword, but also with a purse. However, with population growth and wealth comes another problem: crime. In a city packed with deported Latins, runaway slaves, and impoverished veterans, it becomes dangerous to walk at night. Traditional laws of blood feuds no longer work. State terror is needed. Ancus Marcius builds a prison. In the very center of the city, at the foot of the Capitol line, a cell is hewn into the rock. The Tullianum. This is not a place of correction. This is the anteroom of hell, a dark, damp hole in the ground, where enemies of the state are lowered to rot or be strangled. Look into this pit. There, in the darkness, choking on the stench of sewage, proud chiefs of the Latins and traitors ended their days. Roman civilization showed its teeth. We have bridges for trade, ports for salt, and dungeons for dissenters. Perfect order. Ancus Marcius died a natural death, in his own bed, a rare luxury for a Roman king. He left behind a city that learned to justify any cruelty with the letter of the law. He taught Rome hypocrisy raised to the rank of art. We are not aggressors, we are just restoring justice. This phrase will become the motto of legions for the next 1,000 years. But while Rome enjoyed its new status as a regional gendarme, a wagon was already approaching its gates. A seemingly ordinary wagon drawn by a pair of mules. Inside sat a man who was neither Latin nor Sabine. He was a stranger, an immigrant, rich, ambitious, and very smart. Next to him sat his wife, a woman who knew how to read signs of fate better than any augur. When they approached the janiculum, an eagle descended from the sky. It neatly removed the cap from the man's head, made a circle, and put it back. The wife smiled. She knew what it meant. Rome thought it had conquered all its neighbors, but it did not notice how it was conquered itself. Not by an army, but by money and culture. The era of shepherd kings and priest kings ended. The era of managers, builders, and tyrants was coming. the Etruscan era. The gates opened, letting in the wagon that carried Rome, its greatness and its curse. The man in the wagon looked at the dirty streets not as a home, but as a construction site. His name was Lucumo, but the world will remember him by another name, a name that will become synonymous with royal power: Tarquin. Rome's evolution was preparing to make the sharpest leap, from wooden huts to marble temples, from a local gang to a world power.
But for this brilliance, freedom will have to be the price.
Are you ready to see how Rome sold its soul for a sewer and a circus? To understand the scale of this deal, you need to look at Rome through the eyes of Lucumo, who now calls himself Lucius Tarquinius Priscus. For him, this city was not the sacred land of ancestors, but a neglected, dirty asset requiring crisis management. He did not seize power by force. Why dirty hands with blood if you can gild them? Tarquin conducted the first real election campaign in the history of Rome. He sent the sons of the late Ancus Marcius, the legal heirs, hunting, into the forest. And while the young men chased boars, confident that the throne wasn't going anywhere, Tarquin went out to the people. He spoke not like a king, but like a populist. He kissed babies, shook hands with veterans, reminded them of his generous donations. "I am the first foreigner who wants to become one of you," he shouted.
And the crowd, greedy for flattery and novelty, voted yes. The Romans voluntarily put a yoke on themselves because it was decorated with precious stones. From this moment, Rome ceases to be a big village. It begins to turn into an imperial metropolis. And this transformation begins not with temples, but with sewage. Have you ever wondered what is under the Forum? The Cloaca Maxima flows there, the Great Sewer. Tarquin understood, greatness cannot be built on a swamp. The lowlands between the hills, where people gathered, had been a breeding ground for malaria and filth for centuries. The engineer king decided to drain this swamp. But who will dig? Roman citizens? Warriors? They are too proud for that. Tarquin introduces the concept of corvée labor. Plebeians, used to holding a sword, now pick up shovels. Backs that did not bend before the enemy bend under the weight of stones. It was the grand construction project of the century, and it did not smell like roses. It smelled of sweat, excrement, and damp earth. Hundreds of meters of underground tunnels, lined with stone without cement, hold to this day. Tarquin drove Roman filth underground, hid it so that a beautiful facade could be built on top. This is the perfect metaphor for any empire. Shining marble on top, streams of sewage below. The drained valley turns into the Forum, the heart of the world, the place where the fate of nations will be decided. But Tarquin knows the psychology of the crowd better than any psychologist. A clean place for meetings is not enough for the people. The people need spectacles. He builds the Circus Maximus. Forget the modest contests of Romulus's time. Tarquin brings professional boxers, dancers, and chariot racers from Etruria. He creates an entertainment industry. For the first time, benches for spectators appear. The people are seated according to status. The circus becomes the main instrument of politics. If people are unhappy with taxes or hard work building the sewer, give them races. Give them a chance to scream, to vent aggression watching a chariot smear a racer against the wall. Adrenaline replaces freedom. The Romans roar with delight, not noticing how they are being turned into spectators of their own lives. Along with the circus, Tarquin brings symbols of power. It was he who introduced the fasces, bundles of elm rods with an axe stuck in them. 12 lictors walk before the king, clearing the way. Look closely at this symbol. The rods are the right to flog. The axe is the right to execute. Now, power is not the authority of an elder,
It is the threat of physical destruction. Tarquin dresses in a purple toga embroidered with gold. He sits on an ivory throne. He is no longer the first among equals. He is the master. The Senate, this gathering of proud patricians, tries to grumble. "We didn't choose a tyrant," they whisper. What does Tarquin do?
He does not kill them, like Romulus or Tullus. He dilutes them. He introduces 100 new members from lesser families into the Senate, his supporters, who owe him everything. He drowns the old aristocracy in a sea of loyal upstarts. The old patricians grit their teeth but remain silent. Tarquin's money and the love of the crowd are too powerful a weapon. It seems that this Etruscan magician outplayed everyone. Rome prospers. Walls grow. Neighbors are defeated and pay tribute. In his palace grows a strange boy, the son of a slave named Servius Tullius. Legend has it that one night flames lit up around the sleeping child's head, but did not burn him. Tarquin saw this as a sign. This slave would become the savior of Rome. He brings him closer, raises him like a prince, gives him his daughter in marriage. This was the last straw. In the shadows of the palace porticos, a conspiracy ripens. Remember the sons of Ancus Marcius? The ones sent to hunt boars during the election? They came back. They grew up. And they forgot nothing. 38 years they waited. 38 years they watched a foreigner sit on their father's throne, spending their inheritance on his giant construction projects, elevating a slave's son. Hatred fermented in their hearts, becoming toxic and concentrated, like old vinegar. They understood. Tarquin will not give up power voluntarily. He is preparing a successor, this upstart Servius. If they do not strike now, the Marcius line will remain on the dump of history forever. The assassination plan was simple and crude, like a blow with a club. No poison, no subtle intrigues. It was revenge in the style of a street gang. 2 hired shepherds, symbolic, isn't it? Rome started with shepherds, and with them it tries to cleanse itself. Stage a fake fight right in front of the king's palace. They scream, wave axes, demand justice. The noise attracts attention. Tarquin, confident in his inviolability and wisdom, orders the brawlers brought to him. He wants to judge them personally, to show the people his justice. The stupidity of a tyrant is in the belief in his own invulnerability. The shepherds enter the throne room. One begins to tell a confusing story about a stolen goat. The king leans forward, trying to make out the words of the rough dialect. At that moment, the second shepherd comes from the side. A swing of the axe. The blow was terrible. The blade entered the old man's skull, splitting the very head that conceived the Roman Empire as a business project. Tarquin falls. Blood floods the mosaic floor he himself ordered laid. The guards, stunned by such audacity, do not have time to react. The killers drop the axe and try to run, but they are grabbed. Chaos, screams, servants scurry about. The king is dying. But the sons of Ancus Marcius rejoiced too soon. They did not account for one player. A player who was cunninger than Tarquin and tougher than all the men of Rome put together. Tanaquil, the queen, the widow. She sees her husband with a smashed head. Any other woman would faint or start tearing her hair out. Tanaquil orders the palace doors locked. No one enters. No one leaves. She goes out onto the balcony to the people who have already started to gather, attracted by the noise. Her voice is firm, her face calm. She lies, looking into the eyes of thousands of people. The king is merely stunned, she says. The wound is shallow. He will come to his senses in a couple of days. And for now,
He orders you to obey Servius Tullius. He will rule in his name. Brilliant. While the sons of Ancus Marcius celebrate victory and pack their bags to move into the palace, power slips through their fingers. Tanaquil buys time to strengthen the position of her protege, the former slave with the fiery head.
Tarquin is already cooling in his chambers, and Rome continues to live by his orders, broadcast through a woman and a slave. This was the first Operation Successor in history, played by the notes. When the king's death is finally announced officially, it will be too late. Servius Tullius will be sitting on the throne, surrounded by a loyal guard. Ancus's sons will only have to flee into voluntary exile, cursing Etruscan witches. But Servius Tullius, this slave king, did not come to warm the throne. He came to break the backbone of the tribal aristocracy once and for all. He prepares a reform that will change the very DNA of Roman society. A reform that says, it doesn't matter who your father is, it matters how much money you have. Do you hear that ringing? That isn't swords. That is coins, which will now determine a person's weight. Rome enters an era of cynical pragmatism, where a citizen is just a tax unit on a ledger. Watch closely. Now, before your eyes, a class society will be born. Servius Tullius carried out a revolution without shedding a drop of foreign blood, but he signed his own death warrant with ink. He invented the census. For the first time in history, a person was evaluated not by their lineage, not by the bravery of ancestors, but by their wallet. Do you understand what this means? Yesterday you were nobody because your father herded goats. Today, if you have money, you are a first-class citizen. You buy yourself armor, stand in the front rows of the phalanx, and vote first. Servius Tullius divided Rome into classes, and this structure turned out to be stronger than any walls. By the way, about walls. It was he who surrounded the city with the first real stone ring. The Servian wall turned scattered hills into a single monolith. Rome became a fortress. Rome became a corporation. But in this corporation, the aging CEO forgot that he was surrounded by a board of directors hungry for power. Tarquin, the very one who was pushed away from the throne, grew up, and he found himself the perfect match. Tullia, the king's daughter. You know, there are marriages made in heaven, and there are unions forged in hell. Tullia hated her father for his softness. Tarquin hated him for taking his place. Their conspiracy was not quiet. It was a coup d'etat live on air. Tarquin simply walked into the Senate, sat on the throne, and began a speech. When old Servius Tullius ran in to chase the insolent man away, Tarquin did not argue. He was young, strong, and angry. He simply grabbed the old man by the waist and threw him down the stairs of the Curia onto the stone pavement. And now, brace yourself. What happened next will make you shudder. The wounded but alive king tries to crawl home. His daughter, Tullia, rides a chariot to the forum to congratulate her husband. The driver abruptly stops the horses. "Mistress, there is your father," he says, pointing to the bloody body on the road. Tullia looks at her father, then at her husband standing on the Senate steps. There are no tears in her eyes, only cold calculation. "Drive," she orders. The driver hesitates. "Drive!" she screams and whips the horses herself. The heavy wheels of the chariot jump, running over the living body. The crunch of bones is drowned out by the clatter of hooves. The father's blood splashes on the daughter's dress, on the wheels, on the pavement. The Romans will call this street Vicus Sceleratus, the street of crime. They will bypass it for hundreds of years. Thus began the era of Tarquin the Proud, the last king. If previous rulers wore masks, shepherd, priest, lawyer, builder,
Then Tarquin took off all masks. He was a tyrant, pure, unclouded. The Senate? Dispersed. Laws? Repealed. There is only the king's will. He built the Temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline, forcing Romans to work like slaves.
He fought, expanding borders, but all loot went into his personal treasury. It seemed he was invincible, but tyrants always make the same mistake. They think the people will tolerate it endlessly. They forget that patience is gunpowder, and to explode it, you need just one spark. The spark was a woman, Lucretia. We will not describe what happened in that bedroom when the king's son, Sextus Tarquinius, intoxicated with impunity, decided to take what did not belong to him. Let's just say one thing. Honor for a Roman matron was worth more than life. When the next morning Lucretia, dressed in mourning, told her husband and father everything, she did not ask for pity. She demanded revenge. "My body is desecrated, but my soul is pure," she said. And before anyone could stop her, she took out a dagger hidden in the folds of her clothes and plunged it into her heart. She fell to the floor, and her blood became the ink with which the Constitution of the Republic was written. At that moment, a man whom everyone considered a fool stepped out of the shadows. Brutus. His name literally meant dullard. He pretended to be feeble-minded to survive at the court of the paranoid Tarquin. But now the mask fell. Brutus pulled the bloody dagger from Lucretia's chest. "I swear by this blood," he shouted, and his voice thundered like the voice of Jupiter himself, "that neither Tarquin nor anyone else will be king in Rome again." It was the end. The city exploded. What had accumulated for years, humiliation at construction sites, fear of executions, hatred of Etruscan arrogance, spilled out onto the streets. The gates of Rome slammed shut in front of Tarquin's nose as he returned from a campaign. The king was left in the field, alone, an exile. Inside the walls, the birth of a new world was taking place. The Romans invented a word that would change the history of mankind. Res publica, the public affair. No more one-man rule. 2 consuls, elected for 1 year. If one wants to become a tyrant, the second will stop him. The rule of law, not of man. Beautiful, right? Looks like a happy ending. The villain is banished, freedom has triumphed, the people rejoice. But do not be in a hurry to turn off the sound. Look closely at this new republic. Who became consuls? Brutus and Lucretia's husband. Patricians, the elite. The people got the right to vote, but not the right to decide. The beast that Romulus once brought to these hills did not die. It just changed its skin. Instead of one predator king, Rome got a whole pack of wolves, the Senate. And the appetites of this pack were much scarier. Evolution was complete. From a refugee camp, through betrayals, fratricide, religious dope, and tyranny, Rome turned into the perfect war machine. Now it was not held back by the whims of a monarch. Now it was led forward by the faceless, cold, and ruthless logic of state interest. Roman legions will soon step beyond Italy. They will burn Carthage. They will sack Greece. They will crucify thousands of people along the Appian Way. And all this in the name of the public affair, in the name of the Republic. We started with the question of survival. We end with the question of price. Look at this city, at its marble, which will soon be covered with the soot of fires, and at its gold, which will always smell of iron. Rome proved, to build a paradise for your own, you have to create a hell for others. And when you look at the ruins of the Colosseum, ask yourself one last question, a question that echoes off these ancient stones.
What is scarier? A barbarian who kills for loot, or a civilized man who kills for an idea and calls it peace? The history of Rome is not a textbook of the past. It is a mirror. And if you look into it carefully, you will not see Caesar's profile there. You will see us.